Hi everyone, I'm Abigail. This is Zoe, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. Today we are joined by award-winning author and illustrator Eugene Yelchin. Some of some of the books Mr. Yelchin has written include Spy Runner, The The Haunting of Falcon House, the Newbery Honor book Breaking Salon's Nose, The Genius Under the Table, the National Book Award finalist, Assassination of Bragwain Spurge. And next June, another book Mr. Yelchin illustrated, Boar and Hedgehog, comes out. Thank you so much for being with us, Eugene Yelchin.
Thank you for inviting me.
You were born in Russia when it was the Soviet Union and came to the United States as an adult. You
Right.
also come from a very artistic family. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
About the artistic family?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was born in a city that's now called St. Petersburg. When I lived there, it was called Leningrad. Original name was St. Petersburg, and it's a city that used to be a capital of the Russian Empire. And as a result, there are many museums with excellent art in it that has been collected by the Russian czars. And so very early on, my father exposed me to all that art. Once a week, he would take me to what's called Hermitage. It's in the Winter Palace where the royal family used to live. And they have exceptional collection of Western painting, and there's a Russian museum with the Russian painting. So I became very early on interested in making art. My mother was my mother was working at the ballet school in Leningrad and in the Kirov Ballet Theater, which were then considered to be the best ones in the world. And so I was exposed to that as well. So the art was kind of all around me, and it was something that I was kind of born into.
Growing up in the Soviet Union was very hard. You now have lived in the United States for over 40 years. Does your growing up in the Soviet Union still affect you in any way?
Yes, I think so. It affects me greatly. I lived there until I was 27 years old. So all of my kind of youth and young adulthood was spent there. I went to school there. I went to the Academy of Theater there. I worked there, and I write about it, and that became kind of subject matter for me in my books. Um, and it's easier for me to put myself in the position of my protagonists when I set the work within Russia.
Breaking Stalin's Nose is a fictional book, but the feelings you described were real. Do you think books are more impactful when writers have that sort of emotional connection?
Well, I think you have to have an emotional connection when you write any kind of book or short story, anything at all. Because if you don't care about the subject matter or the events that you are describing or the people you are creating, then they will not feel real. I From the very beginning, I was only making books that cause some kind of emotional reaction in me, whatever it may be, anger or nostalgia, whatever that may be. If I feel the emotional connection, then I can work with my characters and I understand how they feel. So it would be very difficult for me to, for example, write a book about you two guys, because you're a very different generation, and also you grew up here. So we have certain distance between us. Not to say that I would have distance between, I will have just emotional distance between people who live in Russia now compared to when I lived there, because everything changes very quickly.
The Adventures of Bragwain Spurge you co-wrote with N.T. Anderson. How is it different writing with another author instead of writing by yourself?
Well, it's different because I was just lucky to be working with him because the man is a genius, and and we it was interesting. I read his books, but I've never met him. And then we met very briefly when he was in Los Angeles we had lunch. And I suggested to him, I always wanted to make a book in which the illustrations and the text don't agree when they're at war with each other. And so he said, let's do it. And so we did it, but he lives in Vermont and I live in California. So we did the whole book by phone. We just called each other and we talked for a few hours or half an hour, whatever it was, every day. And that's how the book was born.
Did you enjoy filming the book trailer with Mr. Anderson? You were so funny.
Thank you. Yes, I enjoyed it very much. In fact, that trailer was also filmed in 2 different locations. He was in Vermont and I was in California. That's why I designed that setting with 2 frames, so 2 shots could be put together on the same screen.
Yeah, that was funny. You illustrated a book for one of our favorite authors, Gary D. Schmidt, A Long Road on a Short Day. Does he just give you the text, or do you talk about what he's thinking? How did that collaboration work?
Well, usually my collaboration was no different than anyone else's, I believe. Usually the author and the illustrator do not communicate during the process. Perhaps when the illustrations are close to be done, the editor will show it to the author, but rarely. And the reason for it is, of course, that then you see the same story from 2 different perspectives, right? The author sees it a certain way, and the illustrator will see it a certain way, depending on who they are. And when those 2 things meet, it becomes neither ones nor another's. It becomes a totally different thing. It could be very surprising. It usually surprises the author, hopefully in a good way. And the illustrator just gets a manuscript, and you read the manuscript, you just read the words. There's a wonderful saying, maybe you've heard it. The saying is, trust the tale, not the teller. So I can speak about my book, any book, and tell you what I intend by it, but you could have understood it entirely differently. And so you see it the way you want to see it, and the way I've written it is the way I've written it. And that only benefits, I think, the book when many people can see it from different perspectives. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since October 7th, many people have found it harder to be Jewish. There was way worse anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union that you had to experience. From what you have experienced and what you are seeing, how worried should we be about anti-Semitism here? And what do you think young people like us should do about it, if anything?
No, that's a difficult question. Yes, unfortunately, I had to live with that feeling of unease or concern for a very long time. And what happened on October 7th is almost like a book text example of what's been happening in Europe, in Eastern Europe for centuries. And it's just heartbreaking to see it. It became very complicated when a lot of innocent people also suffered as a response to the attack. And there's no right and wrong on either side. It's just a very difficult thing to do in the United States when anti-Semitism was fairly common here until I would imagine late 30s. Late 1930s, even later, I would think, even in the 50s, there were certain apartment buildings, certain clubs, certain public spaces where Jews were not allowed to be members of. And so, I think that Jewish people always lived with that feeling of being different, especially in diaspora, when, yes, there's the minority, we're in the minority, and yet the feeling is among some people that we are somehow influencing the culture, which we are to a degree. It's just very, very difficult, because my whole family was from actually Ukraine. My brother and I were born in St. Petersburg, but everyone else in my family came from small shtetls in Ukraine. And my great-grandparents on both sides were killed by the Nazis during in 41, 42. So it's kind of with that sort of baggage, of course, I react very strongly to events like October 7th. And I hope that this country, because it's so mixed, and there are so many different cultural influences from everywhere, that it will not get hold, that it will pass.
Writing a book is a huge commitment. So when you come up with an idea, how do you become sure that this is a story that you want to commit to and tell?
You can't do it theoretically. You have to sit down and write it. And if you feel that it's something that, when you have a draft, for example, the first draft, right? When it's something that you want to stick with, because it takes several years really to write a book. When you feel that, yes, it speaks to you, it moves you, it surprises you, or at least some places in it that there's something worth keeping, then you try to stick to it. Still, it doesn't mean that is going to be published, or it's going to be completed, or it's going to be what you had in mind. And you probably know it too when you, for example, let's say you want to draw a picture, you have a vision, right? You can kind of see it in your head. Is that right? Yes. And then you sit down and you start painting or drawing this picture, and what comes out is very different from what you had in mind. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but it's never the same. So unless you actually go through the process, you don't know. So you commit from the very beginning. If you have an idea that you feel is a good idea, you have to try it. And whether it works or it doesn't work, you'll find out in the process. It's all kind of in the process. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Do you like writing or illustrating more?
Well, writing is more difficult for me for obvious reasons. Illustrating is easier because I've done it so much longer. But it's just like two different languages trying to speak to the reader through images or through language, and make the reader feel the feeling, I guess, that I am feeling as I'm creating it. So that's really kind of, for me, that's what it's about. So I like it both. It's different, but both are fascinating and very difficult.
What is your process when putting a book together? Do you decide the end before the middle, or do you put it together in order?
No, I don't have the end before the middle. It's kind of a little bit of a misconception to separate the story from the main character. In fact, the main character in your story is the plot of your story. So if you look at a hero of a novel or a short story or a movie or a theater play, whatever that is, the character goes through changes, through transformations. The character wants to achieve something, right? Because it begins with a conflict. So you try to solve the conflict. And when you try to solve this conflict, you develop what's called want, right? You want something. And so that want is what drives the story. But if you solve the problem right away, then it's not very interesting, right? So you want to create obstacles, but the obstacles are actually within the hero, not the outside. So when the obstacles on the outside of your character, then it becomes sort of something that you're not participating in it. You're just kind of watching it, like some of Hollywood movies are like that. But when you really sympathize with the character and you really feel what the character is feeling, and you put yourself in the character's position and say, what would I do in this situation? The situation is difficult. What would I do? Then you really engage in the work. So to answer your question, I worked on the character for the longest, and then I put the character in the situations that will open the character up internally, that you get a kind of a straight line into the character's heart. That's how I do it.
Oh, I see. How much are you worried about artificial intelligence and what its impact on illustrating and publishing may be?
No, I don't worry about it. Why should I worry about it? I don't know. I think that that's probably a good thing for certain things, and it's just a tool. I hope that we're in control of it. So when all the digital painting tools came out, people were worried about it, that it will replace the painting. Well, it didn't. When the digital filmmaking began and the film became obsolete, everybody was worried there was an end of cinema or end of visual entertainment. Well, it didn't happen. It's a tool like anything else. You can use watercolors, or you can use gouache, and you can use oil, or you can use artificial intelligence. If you're an artist, you'll know how to use it. If you're not an artist and using it, I think it'll be apparent. It will be generic and it will be obvious.
Books being challenged and banned is happening in many places. That means those kids won't have the same access to books we do and may not be able to see themselves represented in books. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Could you repeat your question, please?
Books being challenged and banned is happening in many places. That means those kids won't have the same access to books we do and may not be able to see themselves represented in books. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Well, I have thoughts like you have thoughts on it. Everybody who loves books will have the same thoughts on it. And I feel particularly sensitive to the subject because the books that I read in the Soviet Union, the books that were banned, you sort of risked your life, to be honest, to read them. Because if you were caught, arrested, whatever, with a book that was banned by the government, that was smuggled into the country, you could end up in prison. And whether you survive that prison or not is a question. So yes, I'm very sensitive to banning books. I think that we should all kind of speak aloud about this and do what we can to prevent that. And one of the ways of doing it is actually going out and voting.
They won't let us vote. Kind of annoying.
No, I know, but I understand that you can't vote in the presidential election, so you can't. You're still very young, but you can spread the word. You can go to your librarian, you can go to different libraries, you can be active about it. You can use the social media to be active about it. You can get people together. Absolutely.
Can you tell us exactly where you were and your reaction when you found out you won the Newbery Honor?
Where I was, well, it's kind of silly. I was in bed because they called very early and I was still sleeping. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the Newbery Honor was. So I got that call and a very lovely lady told me, and I thank her. And my wife said, "Who's calling you so early?" I said, "I don't know. It was some librarian." And she said, "What happened?" She was talking about the Newbery Honor. I got the Newbery Honor for Breaking Stalin's Nose. And her eyes were like this because she knew, of course, because she's American. And so she told me all about it. That's how it happened. I did not know. I didn't really kind of follow that closely. I didn't even know that the book was up for it.
Wow. What has had the most influence on you and your writing?
That's my answer would take hours to answer you. Well, it kind of goes in stages. I go through certain periods when I read particular writer, and if I like that writer, I will read everything that writer I've written. I sort of grew up on Russian classical literature, which I really like, and it helped me a lot and influenced a great deal of my own work, obviously. And then when I came here, I was exposed to books that I didn't have access to, and so I got into certain authors, and I would look for everything that was published by that author and try to figure out how, because I'm always very interested who's standing behind the stories, who is the person is, and where it's coming from. And so you kind of you infer the individual through the kind of artifice, right? Through the surface, through the words, through the language. And that's fascinating. That's really a fascinating process.
What advice do you have for young writers?
What advice do I have for young writers is to, first of all, to become a very, very good reader. That's the first thing. If you can't be a writer if you're not a reader. You have to read as much as you can and not as many books as you can. That's not what I'm saying, but you have to read in depth. So if you read 10 books in a row and then you found one that you think stands out, that's really interesting to you as a person, that somehow catches your imagination, your attention, you want to know more about it, read it again and read it again. And the more you read the same text, actually, the more you learn. You don't need the quantity, but you need the quality. So you can I can make a list of maybe 10 books that for me would be the books that I can read forever and ever and ever, over and over. And I've done that. Certain books I've read probably 20, 30 times because they speak to me, and there's something in them that is very elusive. It's just hard to figure out what way it's coming from. And so I'm trying to, it's like a detective work, but by repetition, by going deeper and deeper and deeper, that's how you become a real author.
What are you currently writing?
Well, I right now writing a Jewish book. Also writing a book about kind of political book. And I just finished a very huge project that took me 3 years, of almost 4. And it's a graphic memoir. It's called "I Wish I Didn't Have to Tell You This." And it's a graphic. It's about 400 pages. So there's hundreds and hundreds of drawings in it. And it's about me leaving Russia, actually. That's what it's about. So it's coming out in October of next year, in a year. But wow. It's finished.
Does it have a working title?
Well, that's the title I just said. I wish I didn't have to tell you this. That's the title of the book.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. I'd read that.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Finally, it's time for our Turbo 10. 10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I don't know. We'll see. Okay, let's go.
Number 1. What is your favorite phrase to use?
What is my favorite phrase to say? Oh, how are you?
Number 2. What is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
Writing.
Writing. You're already pretty good at that. Yeah. Number 3.
Okay.
What is your go-to snack food?
Apples.
Apples. Nice. That's a good one. Number 4. What was your favorite book growing up?
Treasure Island.
Number 5. If you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Rome.
Wow. Nice. Number 6. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I have more time. Stretch time.
Oh, wow. Number 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
We didn't have cartoons.
Number 8. What is your favorite thing to do when it's raining?
Reading.
Reading. Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
3 what?
dinner guests. They can be fictional.
Oh, they can be fictional.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, three dinner guests. One would be my friend M.T. Anderson. Two would be Samuel Beckett. He's a writer. And three would be William Faulkner, who's also a writer.
Good
So
choices.
I think we would have a good time with those three.
And lastly, number 10. What is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
To get out of the Soviet Union.
You were terrific. Thank you so much for doing that.
Oh,
and thank you so much for spending all this time with us. We can't wait to read your future book.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you all.